Hey everyone, and welcome to another home theatre video. And today we're taking a look at a product that was actually sent to me for review, and that is the BestJoy Universal Remote. This is a smart universal remote that I've actually had for quite a while now. I believe it might actually be a month or two, and in that time basically I've been testing it with all of my existing setup, as well as helping the company actually update the remote and give it new features. So what we'll do in this video is just have a quick overview in terms of some of the features, some of the positives, and also some of the negatives of this remote as well. And what I'll do is I'll do a deeper dive in a separate video where I'll actually go through all of the app integration and how to basically add remotes and things like that. So with that said, if you are interested in this type of content, so anything to do with home theatre or just tech in general, then please do subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any up and coming videos. So beginning with the actual remote itself, so in terms of build and the quality of the remote, so I do really like the back sort of soft coated rubber. It gives it a really good grip in your hand without being grippy to the point where it'll snag on things. It does obviously, as you can see, have this blue accent LED all the way around. There is the option in the settings to actually turn that off. All of the settings on this remote, by the way, you have to actually do through the smart app. They have both Android as well as iOS, and with that you can basically customize every single button as well as add different devices to the remote itself. As I mentioned, you can change the actual LED function, so you can have it on and off. Up until this point, I think I've not actually been able to change the color of the LED. There is an option in the settings where it actually allows you to set it to different colors, but that doesn't seem to actually translate into the remote itself. That's not really that big of an issue for me because blue is the color of my home theatre, as you can see from behind me. So for me, it kind of just blends in with the rest of the theme. So blue is fine for me. When you are actually editing the remote via the app, then what happens is it does turn red, signifying that you are in editing mode. You can add quite a lot of different remotes to it. So currently I actually have my Hisense L9G, I have my LG soundbar, I have the Apple TV 4K, and I also have it paired up to a Mi bridge, or a sort of smart bridge that is supposed to actually enable you to connect to things like Aqara products. However, unfortunately, because of my location, my geolocation, it doesn't actually allow me to interact with my bulbs and everything. Essentially, what this should allow you to do is to control lighting, other devices, air conditioning, all those kind of devices just from this one single remote. And you can actually enable it, so you just kind of swipe on this little button here, and that actually goes through the different devices, as you'll see just there. So as you can see, it kind of switches between. So right now we're on the Hisense L9G. If I swipe again, it will go to the LG soundbar. If I swipe again, it goes to the Apple TV. Now, one of the cool things about this is, regardless of which remote essentially you've got selected, these top function buttons, as well as some of these buttons, you can actually change the functionality. So ordinarily, obviously this is what you get, but the picture mode button up here, that's something that I've actually added from my projector. So essentially I can control the picture modes on my projector whilst still being in the Apple TV remote. In terms of the Apple TV remote, this is the one that I actually had the most difficulty with getting it set up and working the way that it's supposed to work. So initially it wasn't actually working, so it wouldn't actually connect to the Apple TV. Eventually I did get it working through various firmware updates of the remote, as well as figuring out that the way that you have to add it is almost as, well, your Apple TV will see it as a keyboard. So once you've got it connected, it will actually see the remote as an external keyboard. It doesn't change functionality, it still connects exactly the same, it still works while the Apple TV is in standby. So it doesn't actually change anything, but occasionally it will show a little pop-up. I think it pops up in that corner there, and it just says keyboard disconnected, and then it just says keyboard reconnected. It does have a sleep function, so originally it didn't actually have that, and you had the option of just disabling the LED for power saving, And originally it didn't also have the power indicator. So originally you had no idea how long it was going to actually last for. That was one of the things I worked with BestJoy on and actually got that added, as well as a lot of other functionality within the remote itself. I have a long email thread where it was back and forth in terms of trying to get different devices added for all of my devices essentially. So currently with this remote, the positives is the fact that I can literally control all of my devices. I can control my Apple TV, I can control my soundbar, and I can control my projector as well. The downside is that the projector and the LG soundbar only work via infrared, because when adding them, those devices aren't in the automated list of devices that you can actually add. So at this point, I'll just grab my iPhone and we'll do a quick screen recording and we'll go through what actually happens in the app itself. Okay, so that should now be recording. So if we come across, so is the iClick app, you can see just there, you click on that. And this initially can look kind of confusing. So initially when I actually got the remote, I looked at this and I thought, yeah, most people aren't going to be able to figure this out. To bind the remote, you do have to click on the section where it says 1, and then you follow that through and it binds the remote quite easily. The sort of confusing part comes when you're actually reconnecting to the remote. So sometimes it will automatically reconnect, and other times it'll ask you to hold the sort of mute button. So if I just get it to focus in this button here, if you hold that for 3 seconds, that's what actually sort of pairs the remote and gets it to reconnect. So what we'll do is if I hit under 1, if I hit enter, this is what you get. So you get like a settings and a manage option. So first we'll go into the settings, and exactly, so yep, there you go. So as you can see, the color on the LED has changed to red. That means it's paired and it is in editing mode essentially. So these are the options that you get on screen. So obviously at the top you can check for firmware updates. This obviously I'm right up to date. You can change the name and color and things of it there. And down below you have a few options. So you have mouse speed, movement, that is this center button. So that's the speed of this button just there. You have power saving mode. So as I mentioned, if you enable that, it'll basically disable the side LED. So the LED won't actually light up. You have the trackball automatic lock. So that is when you click it, it actually goes into this mode where you can actually switch between the various devices. If you didn't want that and you wanted it, so then you had to actually click it to swipe through, then you can actually enable that and it will lock that up for you. BLE long connection, so that's just the strength of your connection essentially, and how much energy it wants to actually use in order to connect to devices. I'll come on to the charging a little bit later on, because I do both like as well as kind of dislike the charging method as well. So key backlight, so obviously as you can see just there, the keys are backlit themselves, so that's really good for, obviously this is intended for sort of home theater kind of environment, so you need some backlights on the buttons. You do kind of build up muscle memory quite quickly with this remote, because it only has certain buttons, like it's not littered with buttons, which is a good thing. But there are a few suggestions that I have also made to BestJoy for any future releases as well. So one of those was a trackpad, because whilst tactile feedback is needed in this kind of thing, the one thing I miss when using this with the Apple TV is being able to scroll through long lists without having to either click or hold the down button. When you're holding it, it's just not as accurate, and the Apple TV is quite good when it comes to giving you really accurate control for either skipping forward, skipping back, or just navigating lists as well. Right, continuing down, now the language, for some reason, every time you make a change and you come back into this, mine always defaults back to Chinese. So when you first click, if you double click on there, you'll kind of get this menu script popping up in Chinese rather than English. Whatever remotes or devices you've got added, they will still show in English, but the actual menu system, or where it says menu, that will actually populate in Chinese for some reason. But it's not a big deal, and obviously you can get around that just by going back into the app and changing that back. Just below that you have wake up sensitivity as well as lock screen time. So at the moment I've got this set to 60 just because for the video it's better, because that way I don't have to keep re-enabling the remote, it goes to sleep. And wake up sensitivity, so obviously with my set up with the big subwoofer that I've got in the corner. Anytime any bass kicks in, it kind of wakes this thing up, so you can actually turn it down quite a bit, and that allows it to essentially only work when you actually pick it up yourself. Now the bass is so much in my room that no matter what I set it to, it's either going to be too low to the point where I have to pick it up and shake it to wake it up, or it'll be too high to the point where the bass kind of triggers it and it lights up the whole remote. It can be a little distracting, but I just turn it upside down and generally it's fine like that. So that's the main settings for the remote itself. Now if we come into manage, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have a very quick look at this, because this you can delve into very deeply, and that will extend this video quite long. So if we just come into the Apple TV one, initially it always brings up this pop-up. You don't really have any options for that, you just have to click cancel. So as you can see, this is where you have all of your options for the actual remote itself, and these are all your buttons. Now what you can do is you can long press on anything. So if I long click on, let's say, the input button, it gives you the option of either changing it, adding other functionality, creating a macro key. There's a lot of sort of in-depth functionality that you can create, and then you can also click more keys, and here you can actually see all of the functionality that that particular remote has. Another cool little thing is you can click in any location, and where it says replace this, reassign other remote key or activity, that's where you can actually choose, say for example, if I want a function of picture mode from my projector to actually work on the Apple TV selection of remote, you can mix and match all of your remotes onto any one of them, so you can customize them as much as you like. So that's pretty cool. So we'll just come out of that, and just briefly I'll just show you the top two sort of options. So they relate to the bottom two buttons on the remote, and the way I have these set at the moment is the bulb icon that basically turns everything on. I've got that set, so I press that once and it boots up my projector, it boots up the Apple TV, and it turns on the soundbar. It also, whenever my soundbar is doing that weird thing where it switches inputs, if I click it again, it will switch back to the Apple TV and basically trigger that, so then it goes back to HDMI 1 for me as well. If I hit the bottom, if I hold the bottom button, then that is set to turn everything off, and that includes the projector. So any of you guys who have watched my previous videos will know that I've been trying everything to try and get the projector to turn off automatically, and for some reason the L9G just doesn't function well with other devices. So you can turn off your soundbar, you can turn off the Apple TV, you can turn off the Fire Stick, it doesn't make any difference, the projector still remains on, and you have to manually turn it off. This is the first remote that I've actually been able to get to work with it, where I just hold this bottom button and it will automatically turn everything off for me, and it does it every single time. No guessing, no thinking, has it turned off, is it going to trigger back on again? None of that. It works exactly as it's meant to do with that particular button. Now you can't use the power button for that functionality, because if you long press on it, that actually turns this remote off. So you can use the power button just single click, but for that kind of functionality it needs some sort of a long press. So I prefer to have it set, so then it's set to these two bottom buttons, that turns everything on, that turns everything off, and that's universal on any remote that's selected. You can actually set these to macro, so you can make them do whatever you want. Any remotes, any devices that you have added, you can change that functionality between them, and you can also make it do a few different things. So you have a single click, and I think there might be a double click as well. I'm not 100% sure on that one. But I know there's definitely a single click and a long press, and the long press is the ones that I use. I believe the bottom one, if I long press it, actually switches inputs on my soundbar for me, so that's another functionality it's got. And similarly with the top one, I did have another functionality on that one as well, but generally the ones that I tend to use the most are a single click on this top button turns everything on, and a long press of the bottom one turns everything off. Okay, so quickly coming back to the app, so if we come into the remote control device, this is what it looks like when you're adding new devices essentially. So you have a few sections. So you have your infrared remote section, and with that what I've found is no matter what device I've tried to pair it up with going through infrared, it works. It always seems to work. And what you can also do, which is really cool, is just on the top of the remote, just here, you have a little sensor, and you can actually program the remote just by pointing whichever other device you have, be it LED controllers, whatever you want, anything that uses infrared, you can just shine it into that little LED, that little sensor, and it will actually program one of the buttons that you choose. So that was actually really helpful in helping me to control everything, even when the Bluetooth functionality wasn't working. Coming down to the Bluetooth section, this is where, if we just briefly come into this, and I'll just quickly skip through these, and as you can see, it has devices in here that you can actually choose from, but it doesn't have everything. And even then, some of the devices work, but not all of them. So functionality on the Bluetooth side is a little bit more limited, and that's something where BestJoy have been really good in terms of adding functionality, and that's one thing that I've been impressed with, how quickly they've reacted to feedback I've given them. Bear in mind that it was quite a long email thread, but some of those, or well, a lot of those, that interaction was on the same day. So I would literally get home from work and I'd say to them, okay, this function isn't working. They'd reply back to me, what have you tried? Try this. I tried that. If it didn't work, they'd put out a firmware update, and it usually end up helping or solving that issue. Now, the two things that haven't obviously been added is the soundbar and the L9G projector. Those are still only working through infrared, but they still work. And for those, because of the location of them, it's fine. Now, for a lot of people, if you do have a rack set up, then you're not going to have the ability to point this at the rack, more than likely. So that's where the Bluetooth functionality does need to be added. But generally speaking, I can control everything within my room. So anytime you're pointing it at a device, you'll be able to get it to work one way or another. Coming down to the bottom, you can see that it does have all of your functionality for controlling like remotes, remote control devices such as hubs, smart hubs, and you've got AC options, as well as being able to control iClick's own sort of hub as well. They did actually send me that, and ordinarily it would have actually worked with the Mi Bridge, but like I say, because of my geolocation, that functionality isn't allowed through the app, so it doesn't pair with my existing devices. Otherwise, I could have actually controlled every light bulb in my house from this one remote, as well as any other devices connected to my Aqara system as well. And further down on the main sort of menu, you've got a few other options in terms of controlling hubs and things like that. You do have other options in terms of your profile, setting up rooms, and you can create a lot of different rooms with different remotes in each room as well. So in terms of functionality, it is very, very encompassing. Yeah, so in terms of being able to add different devices to it, I think it's very, very encompassing. You'll be able to add just about every device that you could possibly have in a single room. It probably isn't as intuitive as maybe some of the other systems out there. However, even with those, from what I've read and heard on forums, a lot of them tend to need a tech expert to come out and set it up. This is something that I was able to set up without reading any instructions. So obviously it does come with instructions, but I didn't need to read any of them. The general pairing is quite simple, and adding the remotes once you actually figure out what you're doing, that goes pretty smoothly as well. They do need to add more Bluetooth remotes, so that's something that hopefully they are still working on. You do also have an option, if you have a remote that doesn't come up on the list, you can literally just take a photo of it and that will email across to them, and they will then work on trying to get that remote, get the functionality and get that added. Either just by infrared functionality to start with, but eventually hopefully with Bluetooth as well. The Bluetooth functionality, as I said, you just have to pair it slightly differently, and some devices actually see it as a keyboard just because of the way that it has different options where you've got customizable buttons. Coming on to charging, so I did mention that the charging function I both like as well as dislike. So you do have a little magnetic port just down here, and it just magnetically attaches, and where I've got it located just to the over my left shoulder, I've got a little area where I keep all my remotes, and all I have to do is at the end of the day I just take it down there and I just drop it on and it will automatically connect. Now the bit that I don't like is the fact that there is no sort of hub for it to rest into. So the cable connects magnetically, but me being me, I don't like cables on show, so I would have preferred it if there was some sort of a hub, or even if the end of the connector was big enough to where you could just place that at the back of your cabinet and then just have it connect. It's not a big deal, and if that's the only downside of having this type of charging system, then I think they're doing pretty good. But that's the one little sort of nitpick that I would put across to them. Maybe if they could add some sort of a hub design where you could just place this in there, and that way well, you always know it's charging because it connects, and the little light, there's a little LED that pops up just here. It changes from red to green depending on whether it's charging or charged. So you can't mistake it for not being charging, sorry. But it's just one of those things where having something to just dock this into, that would have actually been nicer. I believe some of their other models, so this is a sort of all-in-one, so this doesn't require any other devices for it to work. I believe they do have other models that do actually have the hub, so this is obviously a conscious decision that they made in order to make it as slimline and as sort of low profile as possible. Like I say, the ergonomics of it you get used to very, very quickly. I'm not a fan of the shiny plastic. I've said this on many devices. So once again, like I say, if that is your only, and that's me being nitpicky, just keeping it clean. So the back is a really nice soft touch material which hides fingerprints really well. The front is the complete opposite. It's a glossy plastic, and because of that, no matter what you do, you can wipe it down and within minutes of picking it up, it's covered in fingerprints. They're not as glaringly obvious as they can be on some of the devices, especially not in this middle section. This section seems to keep a little clearer. It's more so just on these side parts here, and especially with the sort of aesthetic of the remote, it does look quite cool. And obviously in a home theater you do want these kind of things to stay fingerprint free. But like I say, if that's the only sort of nitpicks that you've got, then they're not doing a bad job, are they? Okay, so this video's gone on a little bit longer than I'd hoped, but once again, if you do have any questions on the remote, on the functionality, how to work with it, or if you just have any feedback for the manufacturers themselves, I do have direct contact with them, so I can pass those messages on to them. So just drop them down in the comment section below and I'll do my best to actually forward those on. If you haven't already done so, please do subscribe and hit the notification bell. I probably will have a few more follow-up videos, as well as a more sort of step-by-step guide in terms of how to add a remote or add any type of functionality to the remote itself, so another device, or change some of the functionality, because that, whilst it's easy to do, it is a lot more time consuming, and I don't want to drag this video on any longer. Okay, and finally, if you have enjoyed this video and you enjoy this type of content, once again, please do subscribe, hit the notification bell, and give this video a thumbs up. And until the next one, thanks very much for watching.